In the recent live stream for the series The Chosen, they showed a 4-minute rough cut of one of the opening scenes for season 3. It's a brief flashback to an interaction between Matthew and his father Alphaeus. But what you may not realize is that there's actually so much more going on in this moment that The Chosen just couldn't tell you about in this brief scene. Things like what Matthew meant when he claimed that God hadn't done anything in 100 years or 500 years. Or what this tax is all about that this Roman is trying to collect, or even why he's collecting it. Or even why Matthew's position as a tax collector is so terrible that his father would actually disown him. All of these details are hidden beneath the surface in this scene. So if you want to dive even deeper into this scene and learn things that will not only help you to understand the show better, but even understand the Bible better, then join me for this special episode of The Chosen Explained. As the scene opens, a Roman soldier is knocking on the door and attempting to collect taxes from the family of Alphaeus. Now, usually Roman soldiers wouldn't be involved in something like this at all, right? Tax collection was the responsibility of, well, a tax collector. But it appears that Alphaeus is delinquent on his payments. And when taxes are owed, the soldiers step in. But what you might be wondering is, why are the Romans collecting taxes in the first place, right? Why do the Jewish people even have to pay taxes to Rome? Isn't this Israel, their land? But the truth is, Israel as we know it today is a very different place than it was at the time of Jesus. At the time of Jesus, the Jewish people were under the control of the Roman Empire. Rome was conquering the world. And when they would conquer a land, one of the things that they would do was require people to pay taxes. The Roman Empire was expensive, and Roman citizens lived very well. But here's the thing. Jewish people weren't necessarily Roman citizens. In fact, the Apostle Paul makes a point of identifying himself as a Roman citizen because it was that special and that rare for the people of Israel to receive this status. For most of the people living in Israel, they were paying taxes for benefits that they would never see. They were paying to support the empire of their oppressor. And this created incredible resentment towards taxation. We even see Jesus brought into this debate about whether or not the Jewish people should even pay taxes. But not only did Jewish people harbor hatred towards the taxes themselves, they also couldn't stand tax collectors. And this explains the issues between Matthew and his father. As a tax collector, Matthew was despised by basically everyone. And there was really good reason for this. The way taxation worked, a person would vie for the privilege of being a tax collector. And if they were afforded this position, they would actually pay all of the taxes owed to Rome up front. And then they would collect whatever they wanted from the people. So just to get a sense of how bad this was, if this were still in existence today, imagine that you owed $5,000 in taxes, but an intermediary paid for the privilege of collecting those taxes. And that person wanted to charge you $10,000. And there was nothing you could do about it. This is why people despised Matthew. But not only that, look at who he was doing this to. He was doing this to his own people. He was building up wealth for himself while his people suffered, starved, and lost their property, all to support an empire of an outsider, right? An oppressor. Matthew was helping the enemy persecute his own people, and he was getting rich off of it. Perhaps you can understand now why Matthew's father disowns him. The Jewish culture in the first century was an honor-shame culture, and Matthew brings incredible shame upon his family. His family wouldn't want to have anything to do with him. They wouldn't even want to be guilty by association, and so they cut ties. But here's where things get even more interesting. Notice what Matthew's father's name is, Alphaeus. Well, there's actually another disciple who has a father by the very same name, James. Not James, the brother of John, but the other James. Now, perhaps this is just coincidence, but the Bible seems to be pretty intentional about sharing this particular disciple's father's name with us. And just imagine, if this is the case, that Matthew and James are brothers. Imagine the conflict and the bitterness that James would have felt towards his brother, for the way that he hurt their family, for the ways that he was hurting their people. But also imagine the amazing joy that he felt when Matthew decided to follow Jesus, right? Leave his tax booth and completely abandon his old life in order to disciple under the Messiah. Right? The moment that he saw his brother realize that the rescue that he and the Jewish people had been praying for had finally arrived. In fact, that actually ties in something that Matthew says toward the end of this scene. When his mother tells him that he needs to trust the Lord, he says, "Can you name one thing Adonai has done for our people in 100 years, 500? Now these numbers aren't arbitrary. When Matthew says 500 years, he's referring to the moment that the Jewish people were sent into exile in Babylon. For 2 generations, the people were removed from their land and their temple, stripped of their freedom and forced to live among the Babylonians. This is one of the most tragic moments in the history of the Israelite people, and it was still fresh, a fresh wound at the time of Jesus. Because even after the Israelites returned from exile, things were never the same. From that point on, they were ruled by one empire after another after another. The Persians, the Greeks, the Ptolemies, the Seleucids. In all those years, there was only one moment of relief, about 150 years before Jesus. At that time, a group called the Maccabees rose up and forcefully removed the Seleucids from the Holy Land. For several generations, the Maccabees ruled the area and governed the people. In fact, people thought that this might be the future of Israel, that God had finally given them their land back. But then the Romans came in, and everything they thought they'd gained was gone. The Jewish people were frustrated. They were confused. They were praying again for a Messiah who would come and save them. And some, like the Zealots, they sought to take these matters into their own hands, to throw off the Romans as the Maccabees threw off the Seleucids. Others, like the Pharisees, believed that only strict adherence to the law and removal of sin from the community would usher in the Messiah. And then there were people like Matthew, people who basically decided that they needed to fend for themselves, who thought that perhaps their salvation would come from the Romans themselves and the riches and power that they could offer. But what none of them realized is that God had a different plan in mind. A Messiah who wouldn't bring war or vengeance, a Messiah who didn't require perfection of us, but would use his own perfection to save us. A Messiah so different, so wonderful, that even a tax collector would surrender all of his wealth and possessions as soon as he heard Jesus speak the words, "Follow me." What Matthew doesn't realize in this scene, but what he will soon come to know deeply in his heart, is that the hope and salvation that he has always been looking for has always been the rabbi from Nazareth, God's own son, the only true Messiah, Jesus. Well, that's it for this week. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to learn more about Matthew and the world of Jesus in ways that will help you to understand Scripture more easily and see it with an entirely new set of eyes, then you'll definitely want to click this video right here. Until next time, thank you again for watching. Have a great week, and God bless.